Carper. I'm going to be your first speaker. And if everyone's ready, let's go ahead and get started. In our life, here on planet Earth, nothing is more important to our survival than the liquids we consume. Whether it's that jolt of caffeine from a cup of coffee or that irregular glass of water, without these vital, life-sustaining fluids, our human bodies would only survive a few days. In A History of the World in 6 glasses, Tom Standage, a New York Times best-selling author, divides history into periods dominated and driven by beer, wine, rum, coffee, tea, and the American classic, Coca-Cola. In his work, Standage shows the true impact that these drinks have had on the civilizations of the globe. Now, at first we process our favorite thirst quenchers in world history in 2 completely different psyches. But let's pull those memories of homeschool history class woes out of that locked filing cabinet that we keep in the back of our brain and bring them to the same level as our need for liquid refreshment. The drinks that our world consumes has a more profound impact on our history than we could ever imagine. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready to see how these 6 drinks have driven history, and now, only about 9 minutes. Disclaimer, no alcoholic beverage was consumed in the production of this speech, nor has any other alcoholic beverage ever been consumed in the Carper household. And now a brief pause. And we're back. In the beginning, there was beer, and that made its drinkers, well, for lack of a better word, happy. Beer characterizes the early people's switch from a nomadic to a civilized existence. Now, for thousands of years, people wandered the globe in what was called a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. This was all fine and well, but it made it virtually impossible for any permanent type of civilization to be established. However, around 10,000 BC, the inhabitants of the Fertile Crescent began to cultivate cereal grains. Now, the Fertile Crescent is in the shape of those crescent rolls we all eat way too many of during the holidays, and is located right here. Now, because farming centered on a single plot of land, villages began to form around these newly cultivated fields. As the grains began to grow, creativity also blossomed, and the villagers experimented with methods of food preparation. By accident, they discovered the means of producing a satisfying and intoxicating drink that we today know as beer. Interestingly enough, the first record of writing known to all mankind is a recipe for beer written in Mesopotamian cuneiform. All this goes to show how the development of beer directly links to the development of civilization. When I was young, I was always fascinated by that tall, slender green bottle that my mother kept above the kitchen stove, which was off limits at all times and no exceptions and only used for cooking, mind you. Now, of course, we are talking about wine. Wine characterized society's switch from civilized to sophisticated. First developed by the mountain tribes of Armenia and Iran, but made famous by the Greeks, wine soon became a staple of sophistication. The elitist Greeks would commonly gather together at events known as symposia. Now, these symposia centered around 2 things: intellectual chit-chat and the consumption of mixed wine. The elitist Greeks would only sip on significantly diluted wine. They believed that drinking pure wine was barbaric, as it quickly made you drunk. Lightweights. They believed that only minimal alcohol content was needed to bring about fluency in speech, engaging the men in competitions of alcoholically aided wit and eloquence. The Greek consumption of wine distinguished them from the beer-drinking barbarians and played a key role in the cultural and intellectual identity of one of the world's finest civilizations. Yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. The next drink that drove history. Rum and other distilled alcoholic drinks drew the defining line between ancient and medieval society and modern colonial developments. Now, during the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance, a network of global trade was established, with sea freight operating as the primary means of transportation. Now, the men aboard these ships had the same need of liquid refreshment as you and I do. However, aboard the foul confines of a ship, water and other beverages quickly became contaminated, so the seafaring industry adopted a different type of drink: rum. Rum has a high enough alcohol content to keep the drink sterile and, most importantly, keep the crew happy. Later, the addition of citrus juice made it a quote-unquote healthy cocktail, preventing scurvy, which is a vitamin C deficiency. These facts, along with the fact that rum accounted for the second bottle that my mother kept above the kitchen stove, which was off limits at all times and no exceptions and only used for Daddy's tiramisu, made rum 100% necessary to the establishment of the global trading network and the vast expansion of colonies across the face of the earth. When I was 6, before my first day of first grade, my dad came over to me and he was stirring some steaming beverage in a mug. I asked him, "What's that, Papa?" He said, "Son, this is coffee, and this is gonna get you through the first grade." Let me tell you, folks, did it ever. Legend states that coffee was first developed by a Muslim goat herder in Ethiopia. However, when coffee spread to Europe by means of travel and trade, it soon caught on as the dominant beverage of the 1600s. Now, during the 1660s and 1650s, there was a great desire to discuss political and philosophical ideas. Now, what better place to do this than in the cozy confines of a coffee house, sipping on a good old-fashioned cup of joe. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Coffee houses sprung up all over Europe and began to develop specializations in discussion. Some in math and science, others in philosophy, more in business and commodity marketing, and still others in politics and political gossip. Coffee had a profound impact on the Enlightenment era in Europe, and coffee's legacy of providing grounds for discussion, no pun intended, may still be seen today at your local Starbucks. Black tea, white tea, sweet tea, green tea, bubble tea, iced tea, hot tea, cold tea, all the different types of tea. By the 1700s, tea had become the most popular drink in, you guessed it, England. England, yes, it was. Now, because the European climate could not support the tea plants, tea had to be imported all the way from China. The East Indian Company, or the EIC, an importing and exporting giant with vast territories in India, developed a political, economic, and military empire on the profits that they made from importing tea. Now, the EIC was able to stay ahead of other tea importers and exporters by trading for tea not with cash, but with opium, which they grew on their own land for mere pennies. Now, when the British government discovered this opium smuggling racket that the East Indian Company was involved in, they decided not to stop them, but that they wanted some of the monies. So, in cahoots with the East Indian Company, the British government devised a vast opium smuggling market that penetrated through all of China. Now, the Chinese, as you can imagine, were not at all happy about this, so the epic opium wars begun. Now, these opium wars lasted only 2 years, mainly due to the fact that the Chinese, who were still very fond of their bows and arrows and swords, had a hard time getting their kung fu to match up against the more sophisticated kung pao of British fighters. Now, this was tea's impact on a geopolitical scale. But what impact did tea have on its English drinkers? Well, during the late 1700s and early 1800s, the Industrial Revolution was well underway. Tea, made with boiled water and possessing great antibiotic properties, helped keep the factory workers safe from the pollutants in the air and the filthy living environment of their crowded cities. This kept them healthy, well, and alert, allowing Europe to maintain its global dominance for many years. It's the real thing. Without a doubt, Coca-Cola is America's tea. Coke was first developed by John Pemberton as a cocaine-based quack remedy. However, it soon became a popular American icon. Today, it epitomizes globalization, world economics, and brand recognition. In fact, Coke is the second most universally understood word in the world, except for the word no. Gregory Konstantinovich Zhukov, a general of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, embarrassingly developed this hankering for Coca-Cola, the drink of the Americans. And that was a general of the Soviets. He could by no means be seen drinking a soda with such American connotations, so he decided, I'll make the Coke Company an offer they won't refuse. To produce the beverage in clear form and with red Soviet stars on the label. The Coke Company was much obliged, and the general could drink his favorite soda with about as much peace of mind as any other Russian general, up to his knees in corruption and up to his eyeballs in the mafia, could ever drink his favorite soda. While at first the drinks we consume may seem irrelevant to our nation's development, beer, wine, rum, coffee, tea, and Coke have all shaped the civilizations of the globe. So the next time you snap open that bottle of beer, thank the Mesopotamians. Whenever you uncork that bottle that is off limits at all times and no exceptions and only used for cooking, thank the Greeks. Whenever you decide to put a little captain in your tiramisu, thank the ship captains of the Renaissance. Whenever you walk up to that counter to order a crazy small cup of coffee for a not so crazy small price, thank the Muslim goat herder in Ethiopia. And thank goodness I got through the first grade. Whenever you brew a pot of tea, thank the East Indian Company. And the next time you say, oh, I'd like a Coke with that, remember that without these drinks, we would all die. But the types of beverages we choose to drink today will greatly change the way others live for centuries to come.